Welcome in, welcome in. You guys know the game I was playing when I described my special guest today. We're going to see if we can manage to talk about some very important subjects and keep the video up. So we'll see how that goes. I'm going to be talking to Dr. Peter, and he's an internist, cardiologist, epidemiologist managing cardiovascular complications of both viral infection and injuries developing after you know what. So we're going to be talking about that, Fauci retirement, etc. And also he's the author of a book just out. We'll also be talking about that with using as little words as possible. So join in the fun, see if you can figure this out. And I'm going to go ahead and have Dr. Peter added to the stream. So thank you again for joining me. I will, regardless, of course, be putting this video up on free speech loving platforms in its full entirety, just in case. But we're going to see, how we can finagle this. Thank you so much for coming on. I know that you're so busy with so much. I mean, my goodness, that I feel guilty when I reach out to you like, if you can squeeze me in, let me know. So how about we just start there? What have you been busy with lately?
Well, I've had this probably today, just multiple TV spots. It's common in South America and India to just use the first name. People call me Dr. Peter. I think that's perfectly fine. So that'll do well for the Southern Hemisphere audiences. But we've been following the pandemic news. And August 11th, our CDC came out with new guidance that really, I think, was a game changer.
Yeah, and so we can talk about that. Definitely want to talk about that. And there's just so much going on right now. It does seem like certain things are falling apart. But let's go ahead and let's see if I can be technical. Let's go ahead and talk about this book that you just came out with. Let me share let me share my screen right here. So here's the book. We're not going to read the title in its full entirety. It's The Courage to Face. You can read it for yourself. And you did this with John Leake, and he was actually like a true crime writer?
Yeah, John Leake and I took a year to write the book. John is from Dallas. He did a lot of his education up in Boston, lived most of his life in Europe, in Vienna, became a criminal investigator, a true crime author. And John, when he returned to Dallas to work with me specifically on the book, he said, listen, there's a crime of all time being committed. And I want to, work with somebody who understands the medical narrative and who's involved on this, someone who's apostate, challenging the orthodoxy, which I was. And we teamed up in this book now. A few days ago, Christy, it hit 56 out of 2 million books on Amazon. It's doing incredibly well. Courage to Face It, preventing hospitalizations and deaths while battling the biopharmaceutical complex. And it's a story. It's not a medical book. It's a story. And it's a story about me and others and the advent of treatment of the illness and how instead of being celebrated and making this a standard worldwide, there was crushing suppression by the biopharmaceutical complex that was intentionally trying to promote fear, suffering, hospitalization, and death in order to advance the agenda of the mass indiscriminate program. And so that's really what happened.
Now, this is an exciting book, but you're also one of the few doctors that has been speaking on these issues that's managed to stay on Twitter with, as we were talking about earlier, over 500,000 followers. What's your secret?
I previously had a group Twitter account with some other doctors called COVID-19 Treatments. And that Twitter account was suspended multiple times and finally deleted. And so now I have joined a group lawsuit with Twitter that has standing. And I was shocked actually yesterday where, what Twitter's motion to dismiss was, Christy, you'd be amazed. They actually have filed a motion to dismiss based on SLAPP. And SLAPP is a strategic lawsuit against public participation. Twitter is saying that they are an active participant in the public discussion on the pandemic. And that by manipulating accounts and deleting accounts, that's how they are having a conversation. And this is a stunning development.
It sounds very backwards. It's like this lawsuit would prohibit our ability to have the conversation by silencing others.
Right, but Twitter is telling the judge, Twitter has a right to have a conversation, and the method by which they're having the right is actually manipulating our accounts and deleting our accounts. This is an amazing twist and turn. In separate legal action, American First Legal has gotten the discovery that Twitter and I believe Facebook, they were in active meetings and discussions with the CDC in crafting the false narrative to go over social media. And a lot of that was manipulating our accounts.
It's incredible. I'm already seeing a lot of comments about what to do if you received the mandated treatment, we'll say. And I know that you just had a conversation with popular podcaster Bongino, and he said he regretted receiving this particular treatment. And so if there is there a way to kind of get it out of your system?
Well, we've had some recent data. You're right. I went on with Dan Bongino, a good guy, now a friend in the media. Dan has a chronic underlying malignancy. It's in remission, but he did receive several of the mandated genetic products. Now has great regret on these because Dan's been following the literature as I am. Paper by Roltgen and colleagues shows that once taken into the body, the genetic material is stuck in lymph nodes for months. That's as long as they've looked. It may be longer. There is a paper from Malmo, Sweden by Alden and colleagues, the lead author, Yang D. Marinis, demonstrating that the product, one of the products, the single-stranded ribonucleic acid product, on lipid nanoparticles actually reverse transcribes into human DNA within about 6 hours in a human hepatoma cell line. So that actually means these products could change the human genome. This was very, very concerning finding. The CDC on this website always said, no, they don't change the human genome, but in fact, they do. And then work by Bruce Patterson shows that the product, the spike protein, that's the deadly product. This protein was designed by the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and 2 papers by Menacheri as first author, Barrick as senior author in Nature, and Proceedings of the National Academy of Science. This was a U.S. government project. Our universities did it. It's funded by the NIH. The work was done in the lab in Wuhan, China, the biosecurity lab. And there are some Chinese authors, but the vast majority of American authors. The title of these papers is Emergence of SARS-CoV-2 in the Human Population. This is in 2015. So I'm telling you, the spike protein was engineered to be deadly and invade the human body. We now know the spike protein through these mandated products gets into the brain, gets clearly into lymph nodes, as shown by Stanford, bone marrow, the heart. Paper by Bohmeyer and colleagues has shown the spike protein in the heart causing inflammation or myocarditis. And then there's a paper from University of Pittsburgh, very worrisome, that the S2 segment of the spike protein interferes with 2 cancer suppressor genes, the tumor suppressor P53 gene and the BRCA or BRCA gene that governs female breast and reproductive cancers. It couldn't be worse. I mean, a single protein, 440 base pairs in the coding, 1,200 amino acids, multiple glycosylation side chains. This is awful. It causes neurologic disease, causes heart damage, bone marrow damage, potentially causes cancer. Recent paper on my Twitter feed shows it has tremendous homology to human proteins. That's the reason why it evokes so much autoimmunity. This in no way, Christy, arose in nature spontaneously. No way whatsoever. The published papers from the University of North Carolina say it was designed, and I think investigation is needed.
Absolutely. And since you mentioned it, I'm going to bring in another screen here. Forgive me, guys. I'm still learning how to do these technical things. Okay, stop that. And then I'm going to share this other screen. Okay, here we go. Share. All right, so this is from Vinay Prasad, and he's pretty mainstream, I would say. Right? I mean, is that your evaluation of Vinay Prasad? I'm assuming you're familiar with him. It shows
he's an academic physician. He's a junior to me. He does have a publication track record. It's not to my extent. He's not U.S. Senate level, but he, I think, as someone who, was originally trying to develop a media presence, he was realizing that ethically he couldn't go along with the orthodoxy or the narrative. So he is starting to, catch up in a sense to where we've been in getting the data out.
And if that's hard for anybody to see, I'm just taking that full screen a moment. It says, it is now undeniable that this treatment can cause more myocarditis in men under 40 than the virus itself. And I mean, that's basically what you were saying as well, right?
Well, let me address this. There was a false claim that the virus itself was causing large numbers of cases of heart inflammation. This was all generated from ICD codes from hospitalized patients, of which cardiac troponin is measured. And the same thing would be true for pneumococcal pneumonia or gram-negative sepsis. About a third of patients have positive cardiac troponins because they're sick in the ICU. So it didn't meet a definition of myocarditis. So this is false narrative that, if you get the respiratory illness, you'll get myocarditis, and all these pumped up numbers. We know this wasn't the case because there were published papers from the NCAA athletes and from the military looking for myocarditis with the respiratory infection. This is before the mandated products. They couldn't find it. They gave up. The colleges gave up on doing cardiac MRIs on the athletes because they couldn't find it. Now we have the advent of the mass mandated products, and boy, the myocarditis is exploding. That's what's being shown in that graph here. It's clear that installation of the genetic code for the spike protein is disastrous for the human heart.
And if anyone's just joining, I'm talking to Dr. Peter. And if for some reason this disappears from this platform or others, just please follow on alternative platforms like locals.com, christyleetv.locals.com, or freenews.news, and you can find full segments there. Just a forewarning. But we're trying our best to keep this video up. That's why we're just referring to him as Dr. Peter. I have a very awesome, educated viewership, so they will know who you are without just coming out and saying it. So another thing, obviously, I wanted to talk about was the whole quote unquote retirement of Dr. Fauci. I believe that you talked about this on America Out Loud. I know that you do some things with America Out Loud as well as Dr. Bregan. Let's see. Here we go.
Well, I'm the host of the McCullough Report on America Out Loud Talk Radio. So I'm on talk radio twice on Saturday, twice on each Sunday, and then the podcast hits the podcast network on Tuesday. So I've been a regular presence there for quite some time. In fact, I think I have the most widely viewed show.
Yeah, America Out Loud is doing great work, and I love Dr. Peter Bregan as well. Another Dr. Peter, he does great work as well. And so, what are your thoughts on this? It's like it was saying that he was retiring, but he specifically said in his letter that he was not retiring. He was just stepping down from those positions. What do you think the game is here? Do you think he is doing this because of the fallout from some of the narrative? He's trying to avoid any kind of accountability because, as you said earlier, all data shows that what we were dealing with was created rather than happening outside of nature.
He is a division director at the NIH of the National Immunology, Allergy, and Infectious Disease branch. It's not a high position, and people, I think, have inappropriately elevated him far beyond what's a relatively low-level NIH position. He has never made the claim that he's ever seen or examined a patient with the pandemic illness. He's never claimed to have any expertise in treating or helping people through the illness. And on his announcement of his retirement on the NIH website, I think it's really telling. He never mentions the pandemic or the pandemic virus, as if it didn't occur, as if the last 3 years didn't happen. And I think Americans should take note of that. I just finished watching the video of Megyn Kelly, go absolutely bonkers
Oh, she had
on
some
him.
deep words in there.
Yeah, where what the damage that was done to the nation, whether it's through his advice, through two different presidents, through two different White House task force, the damage that was done to the nation is irreparable. The lives lost, the unnecessary hospitalizations. It's all in our book, Courage to Face It. The suppression of early treatment, which was intentional and by design, promoted fear, suffering, hospitalization, and death. And by my estimates, and under testimony in the U.S. Senate twice, multiple state senates, I estimate that 2/3 of 1 million hospitalizations and 1 million deaths and 10 million hospitalizations could have been avoided with an early treatment program. We didn't have the right people in place. We needed teams of people on contagion control, early treatment, late treatment, and on using various forms of inoculation preventively. And I laid this all out for America in my initial testimony. It's called the 4 Pillars of Pandemic Response. It wasn't followed. Jay Bhattacharya, one of my frequent contributors on Fox News, Jay, with Martin Kulldorff and Sunitra Gupta, published the Great Barrington Declaration right after my first treatment paper in American Journal of Medicine. Hundreds of thousands of people signed Great Barrington. And it said that we should only protect those at risk, the seniors, take special efforts, and we should not lock down. It should be business as usual. The Great Barrington was attacked by our NIAID director. And in fact, if we would have followed McCullough treatment protocol approaches, the 4 pillars, and the Great Barrington Declaration by Jay Bhattacharya, the pandemic, would have been over with. We would not be in a recession. We basically squandered 10% of our GDP on this, and untold numbers of lives lost in the hospital, inconvenient hospitalizations, businesses shut down, people's schools and careers ruined, military careers ruined. It is a tragedy that I think America will never forgive him for.
What do you make of his statement that he wishes that we would have actually had harsher lockdowns?
It goes to show you how distorted the human mind can be, how separated someone like that. He's a low-level physician, not well trained in background. He's not kind of a top of his class type of person. How someone like that can get high enough up and have the, Scott Atlas's book points out that he thinks a large part of that persona is just medical incompetence. And Scott lays it out, how we can have somebody incompetent rise to that level and let that happen in our country. I think is a real travesty.
There's more and more evidence, as we mentioned earlier, coming out that it certainly sounds like he lied under oath. And Rand Paul promises to go after him. Will it affect anything that he is stepping down? Is this a way to try and protect himself, or do you think we'll actually see any action on holding him accountable? I mean, if nothing else, for lying.
Yeah, I think he'll be held accountable. And the midterm elections will mean a lot. If the Republicans come into power in the House, they'll start to have real strong subpoena power, investigation power. Senator Ron Johnson's posted over 40 senatorial letters, which are basically placeholders for investigations. And I think the FDA commissioner is in deep trouble. NIH division director is in deep trouble. CDC director. They're going to have nowhere to hide. The publications make it clear it was a government operation that created SARS-CoV-2 and the spike protein. It's the U.S. government that did. And they were working on the threat and working on the response, which was various forms of antigens to be injected or monoclonal antibodies. But it's clear it's a U.S. government operation. The work was done in China. And there was Chinese collaboration. Moderna CEO Stefan Bainzel, he was the CEO of BioMérieux, and he built the Wuhan Biosecurity Lab with the Chinese when he was leading the French company. He built that lab. Then he leaves in 2015 and he joins Moderna. And then Moderna co-writes the patent with the National Institutes of Health. You probably heard recently Moderna's suing Pfizer over the patent.
I was just going to ask you about that.
People ask my opinion. Yeah, Christy, people ask my opinion. I said, yes, this will all come to light. It takes a long time to write a patent, and patent prosecution takes a long time. Moderna and the US government wrote the patent on the product a long time ago. And we knew this because when the crisis was announced in the United States, 3 days later, Moderna announces they have a product. How can they have a product in 3 days? You can't invent something in 3 days. This was planned. This was all planned. In Peter Bregin's book, who you mentioned, the Global Predators book, Peter Breggin says that there was, and he puts this in his timeline, 36 pandemic preparedness events since 2012, 36, 25 of which generated documents. And then, and these are, Rand Paul could subpoena all these documents easily. And then 6 of them were filmed. These were filmed. It was clear this was planned. This was dealing with a threat and a response. A lot of these are kind of mock scenarios. There are now 3 papers, one by Farkas and colleagues published in Military Medicine, 2 by Yen in the preprint server system, declaring that SARS-CoV-2 is a biological weapon. It meets the criteria.
Yeah, I want to do, since we mentioned it, let me see. I want to just be able to show the book that we're talking about. I've had him on my podcast a few times as well. The other Dr. Peter, let me see if I can pull this up.
Well, the reason why the book's important, and it's basically the global predators, we are the prey. I wrote one of the introductions because it gives the timeline of exactly what happened, and we need the timeline. It has over 1,100 references. And recently I went on with Steve Bannon at CPAC, and Steve impressed me by saying one thing is Steve Bannon said, "Thank goodness you guys have written the books." So, the book that John Leake and I wrote, Courage to Face It, the Breggin book you're showing, Bobby Kennedy's book, The Real Anthony Fauci, Scott Atlas's book about the cloud over the White House, Naomi Book's book about the bodies of others. The reason why the books are important is because they document what happened. They're nonfiction. They document what happened, and they have citations. Bannon says, and I think he's right, the electronics are going to be washed clean. Twitter, Facebook, all the electronic media is already so distorted. It's so censored. It's so contorted by the false narrative. The electronics are no good. We're going to actually rely on print media, documentaries, and then independent media like this.
Yes, absolutely. Another thing I wanted to get into is this whole issue about, it seems like there's more and more coming out about the mandated products and what they may do to fertility, and the recommendation that pregnant women get it. Actually, that's another thing I'm going to share is a post by Viva Frey. I'm sure you're familiar with him. He was just posting about, pointing out, at least as far as the UK, let me find that one. He posted that the UK, the government of the UK, had put out toxicity conclusions. It says, in the context of supply under Regulation 174, it is considered that the sufficient reassurance of safe use of the, in pregnant women cannot be provided at the present time. Women who are breastfeeding should also not be, These judgments reflect the absence of data at the present time and do not reflect a specific finding of concern. So why is this coming out like Viva Frey is saying? Why are they saying this now after nearly 2 years of advising this group to receive this mandated product?
Yeah, well, this letter hit my feed. I tried to validate it. I couldn't. This may be a letter from someone, expressing some concern that went in and got posted on the site, Christy. But let me just say this much.
You're saying this isn't verified yet? Yeah,
I haven't been able to verify that. But let me say a recent survey was done by Zogby and Associates, really a reliable survey company. And they found of 2/3 of people who took it in the arm, 2/3 of people out there did take it in the arm. Of those who did, 15% have some new disease or symptom or some new medical problem. They really regret it. 85% are fine. And that's what I told Dan Bongino. I said, listen, 85% are fine. And data analyzed by Sasha Ladipova on Trial Site News, an independent news platform, has identified that the majority of deaths and complications that occur after taking it are in restricted lots, certain manufacturing lots. And so the leading thinking here is that a large number of lots and a large number of people who get these are probably getting degraded genetic material. They're no longer supercooling it. The material handling changed a lot. It's going out to pharmacies. They're using multi-use vials. Air is being introduced as the nurses and technicians, put the needle in through the diaphragm of a multi-use vial. These are very delicate lipid nanoparticle structures. My hypothesis is 85% of people are getting relatively degraded material, and those lots basically are, in a sense, not very potent. But 15% are getting really locked and loaded, potent, well-manufactured genetic material, and that's installing the spike protein, and it is fatal. It can basically kill within a matter of hours or days, causes blood clots, heart damage, is just ravaging people. And so it's related to lots. So we really have to hope most people have gotten degraded material. Dan Bongino asked the question. He goes, when is it over? When is my worry over with? And I said, listen, I'm following patients carefully. 85% of people have taken them. I can't see any signs of anything wrong. I think my clinical intuition would say after a year, I think people are okay. But conversely, these deaths that are happening, this syndrome, sudden adult death syndrome, we just had a Miami Dolphins front office executive, young man in his 40s, die, just one after another, seeing these. I can tell you on death, any death that comes within 30 days of taking an investigational product is due to that product until proven otherwise. I'll say something about death. Death in the United States prior to the pandemic was 40% heart disease, 40% cancer, 20% other causes. There's always an explanation, Christy. There's always a vignette, a long history of heart disease, dying after bypass surgery, long history of cancer, and the other causes, suicide, drug overdose, motor vehicle accident. There's always an explanation. This idea that we can have large numbers of young people dying with no explanation, the only thing that's out there is the fact they've taken one of the mandated products, if indeed they have.
And we didn't really get too much into the whole reorganization of the CDC. Do you have any predictions when it comes to what will happen with that? Same thing, though. People were kind of like, even I believe it was, the New York Times, even in their headline, talked about botched response. And so it seemed like there was maybe a little bit of accountability happening. But then even she was saying, to the same tune as Dr. Fauci, that actually she was saying things should have been harsher in terms of a response, which is crazy because in her memo, she talked about even data being incorrect. So what do you make of that? What do you think is going to happen with the CDC?
Well, I think these admissions right now, there's a lot of preparing, I think, for inquiries. We've had Deborah Birx come out and say, well, we know these didn't work, and we know the majority of people in the hospital have already taken them and what have you. So she's kind of already painted that all up. Now our director of the CDC has come out and said we've made large mistakes and we need to own them. Well, this is what I would say. And the CDC works for us, not vice versa. So as an agency that works for us, the CDC competencies are limited to outbreak investigation, in vitro diagnostics, and data analytics. The CDC never should have been involved in making recommendations on therapeutics, on making recommendations on anything given in the arm every 6 months at all, period. They should have had no recommendations there because it's beyond their expertise. And they should have had no recommendations on social distancing, masking, contagion control. It's beyond their expertise. And we know this because somehow the CDC recommendations were being used by the airlines and telling people that they need to wear masks on planes. And that was ultimately struck down by a Florida judge. Said, you can't do that. That's an overreach. The CDC doesn't have that power. And in fact, the masks came off and they never came back on. Now what we're seeing is, we see school systems and border agencies, and they all say they rely on the CDC. And the CDC now has come out on August 11th and said that those who have taken them every 6 months and are fully compliant, that they're indistinguishable from someone who's never taken them. Basically meaning they don't work whatsoever. But we still see school systems saying, well, in order to come back to school, like in the DC school system, you have to be, fully taking it with the mandated products. Say, wait a minute, you're not following the CDC. The CDC says there's no difference. The same thing at the borders. So if an American who's never taken one of them leaves the United States and comes back, they're okay. But if someone outside the United States, let's say Novak Djokovic, he hasn't taken it, he can't enter the United States. Well, I mean, again, this is incongruent. You can see how the policies now are absurd. They don't even follow the CDC. The CDC was out of harmonization with the WHO on routine testing for over a year. WHO in June of 2021 said, listen, no more routine testing, no weekly testing. It doesn't work. Drop it. It's never FDA cleared. The CDC actually still passively supported that until finally on August 11th, the CDC came out and said no more routine testing. How many Americans were tortured with PCR tests in the nose once a week at work, in the military, and in sports? It was all unnecessary. It was all wrong. It went against the WHO to begin with. That's this discordance between the agencies worldwide and inside the United States will become a source of investigation. It will. I mean, one of the biggest ones that led to death was the use of remdesivir. November of 2020, the World Health Organization, after doing the largest study, reviewing all the data, had an ethics committee, European Society of Critical Care. They said, do not use remdesivir. Do not use it. It leads to increased death, kidney injury, and liver failure. And in fact, the United States continued to use it. The Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services put a 20% bonus on the hospital payment if it's used. It's actually, we have a chapter in our book on this. This will become the source of investigation. How could the United States do this when the WHO broadly recommended against it, that it was costing American lives? And in fact, it did.
It doesn't make much sense, and it does make things continue to be scary, because if you have someone like Dr. Fauci saying he wished things would have been harsher, and now you have them talking about other pandemics, other viruses. I mean, my gosh, within the span of a week, I had seen, of course, them talking about monkeypox, which involves a very specific small group that is most at risk. And then you have them talking about polio being found in New York City water or something. And then I saw they're starting to talk about bird flu again. It's just like, we can't get away from this obsession with what's going to be the next thing. So any thoughts on all of these other talks of
Well, this is going according to plan. And again, it's in our book, Courage to Face It. The Gates Foundation, the World Economic Forum in 2017 formed CEPI, the Center for Epidemic Preparedness and Innovation. And that was a multi-billion-dollar funded organization that said there will be repeated infectious disease pandemics, and there will be a response. The response will be mass mandated products in the arm very frequently. This was all planned. And so we've actually had a monkeypox response unit. The CDC has had, when they have their authors on monkeypox, they actually say the monkeypox response team. They've had this in place for a long time. Now, this was actually all planned, that America and the world is going to go through these tribulations, if you will. We have two declared national emergencies right now. One is the current viral pandemic, and the next one is monkeypox. And there's no evidence of an emergency. The hospitals are basically empty. We can treat patients as an outpatient. Nursing homes are fine. Most people have been through it. Monkeypox is restricted to largely the gay and bisexual male population. In the human-to-human transmission, it took on a sexually transmitted disease pattern. There's no doubt about it. And, it's easily treated with a drug called tecovirimac or TPOXX. So I can tell you, there's no emergency. This is no different than syphilis or gonorrhea or anything else we treat. So, this declaration
stop them from keeping us in this state of emergency, because it seems like it's being used for so many things. I mean, even when it comes to, you had Nancy Pelosi before saying outright that the president could not forgive, just sweeping his hand, forgive student loan debt. He could delay it, but not forgive it. And now we're seeing this attempt made. And it's again under, I believe, from what I've read, they're using again this state of emergency for this rationale and for trying to give him this power. Is there any end game to this constant state of saying we're in a state of emergency?
Well, I can tell you, you hit on it. The state of emergency allows the free flow of money from treasuries. That's what it really does, with no oversight, with no budgetary reconciliation, without any type of office of accounting. It's a free flow of funds. When you have emergency declared, then the money just flows. So in our book, we describe what happens. The money flows from treasuries to this biopharmaceutical complex. It flows to CEPI, World Health Organization, the large manufacturers. And the manufacturers now, they don't need a sales force. Their development costs are covered. Do you know, for the bivalent vaccines, the BA4 and BA5 vaccines, that the investigation of a new drug application was just filed August 22nd? They have announced that there'll be no human testing, and just based on laboratory work in rodents, that these products are going to be brought forward for human use. And I can tell you, antibodies in rodents are a very poor surrogate what's going to happen in humans. And there's no assurances on safety with the bivalent vaccines. There's already been a pre-purchase notice of 170 million doses. I mean, this is extraordinary now. We are in the twilight zone. There is no regulatory traction at all. It's wide open malfeasance. It's wide open corruption, sweeping through our regulatory agencies. Money flows from big pharma to the FDA. And the biggest source of conflict of interest is that officials at the FDA, they get their next jobs with big pharma and with venture capital firms. We know this. Former FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb is on the board of Pfizer. He's advising people to take these. We know that the commissioner after him, Stephen Hahn, he's joined the venture capital firm supporting Moderna. And so this is in the open. This is in the wide open now. We have wide open corruption. The medical journals are corrupt. The courts are corrupt. Treasuries are being drained dry. We have got record high inflation. This is really adding up to terrible times ahead.
On that note, a lot of the time I like to try and weave in faith and the Bible and God. What do you make on the spiritual side of things of all this?
I'll tell you, the faith community is very activated. All over the country now for a couple of years, there have been grassroots organizations, faith-based organizations, freedom meetings, freedom rallies. I think I've spoken at probably 100 of them. You've been there too. It is an extraordinary event that we see right now. The having our civil liberties stripped away in the guise of a medical emergency, a pandemic that's not an emergency, and watching this happen, that's galvanizing Americans, and it's galvanizing the faith-based communities to realize, what we're talking about is a crystallization that should be clear in everyone's mind. There's good versus evil out there, and it doesn't matter what religion that one follows. One can see this happening. I'm doing a lot with the people of India right now, where it's 85% Hindu and about 15% Muslim. They can see it too.
That's interesting. And do you have any predictions of where we're headed? Do you think that we're finally starting to get out of this mess, or do you think it's going to get worse before it gets better, or any kind of feelings one way or the other?
Well, we're heading for more tension. A recent front page article in New York Times in May of 2022 said that 35% of Americans either haven't taken it or they're not going to take any more of them. They're not going to. And the CDC says 18% have not taken any at all. I can tell you that's me. I haven't taken any at all. And it means 17% have taken one or two of them and are not going to take any more. So that's 35% of the country is dug in. And that 35% is only going to expand. So as it gets to 45% and 50% of the country dug in, it's over with. There will not be a needle in every arm every 6 months. It's not going to happen. People are dug in. The uptake of the pediatric program has been terrible. It's been less than 5% of parents have brought the kids in. So the word is out. Everyone knows. There's a recent survey by Skidmore from Michigan State showing 22% of people now either know somebody who's died or been seriously injured or disabled with one of them. I mean, it's wrecking the health of America, and people know.
It's really, really sad. I mean, obviously, one thing that we can all do is pray. I feel like no human, not at least not one human, is going to get us out of this mess. So we do need to look to our spiritual father to get us out of this mess. Is there any other things that you're working on right now, or anything else I should have asked you about?
Well, we're looking for the big news on the fall, and I anticipate there will be this, following this malfeasance, the approval of the bivalent vaccines. I think there's going to be a doubling or tripling down with pre-purchase of 170 million doses. They're not going to let them sit on the shelf. You're going to start to see universities ramp up the pressure for people to take these to come back to class, employers, etc. I think the interesting thing, though, is that any school or employer who mandates the products, nobody steps forward and says they're responsible for it. There's never a CEO or a COO or a board that says, yeah, it was their decision. It's always anonymous. It's always anonymous. Nobody actually knows who actually made the decision to do this. It's clear the sentiment in the country, they don't want any more of this. The crisis is largely ebbed to a very low level. People can get through this. So I think we're going to come to a lot of tensions. People are going to have to be willing to change jobs, take a year off, switch schools. And I think as people vote with their feet, they will realize, and the employers will realize that they're in trouble. Remember, employers that are mandating this, and the military that are mandating this, with no exceptions, none. They're even going against the CDC. The CDC says not everybody can take this. Remember, Aaron Rodgers just went on with Joe Rogan. Aaron said, listen, I've got a PEG allergy. I can't take these. And Aaron's right. The CDC says he can't take them. Yet Aaron describes the discrimination that he received by the NFL, which was extraordinary, and the behavioral things that were done to players, which was extraordinary. And I can tell you, there needs to be an accountability from the NFL executives who did this. There needs to be accountability from the corporate executives who did this. They've harmed their players. They've harmed their employees. The military's been harmed greatly. And so in the end, those who actually executed this plan, this false narrative that's been so destructive, they will have to stand for their decisions.
One more thing, and we can wrap this up because I know you have a lot of other things to do. What do you, and maybe you don't have a comment on this at all, but I know that there's a lot of pressure to move into a digital currency. And I believe the president has even signed an executive order that we might be seeing more accelerated move in this direction come December. Do you think that we'll see any correlation between the pressure to get this digital currency and it being tied to mandating of products in the future?
I think the grand plan, and a great program to watch is Majid Nawaz, who went on Rogan actually after I set the records on Rogan. Nawaz came in and did a wonderful job explaining this. If we go to a completely digital currency where we don't actually vendor any cash anymore, then our digital value can be placed up against what's called a social credit score, and the Chinese are always doing that. So the social credit score can be virtue based, and if there's a decision that there's a virtue on wearing a mask or social distancing or driving the right way or purchasing the right products, then there can be a tremendous manipulation of populations, and it may come down to pandemic response measures. I think the freedom of a paper currency or coin-based currency always keeps things fair, balanced, and I hope we don't move to a digital currency. I'm worried about it.
Me too. All right. I wanted to be able to show your book one more time because we were just kind of referring to it generally so that we don't get kicked off. But the courage to face it with John Leake and Dr. Peter. And aren't you already working on another one?
Yeah, we have a book we're working on regarding the whole development of the program, the next wave of it. And there's no doubt about it. It's true crime. The crimes in this book have to do with the suppression of early treatment. The crimes are fraud and mass negligent homicide. The victims are the Americans and people worldwide who are hospitalized and lost their lives because of this. The perpetrators are the biopharmaceutical complex, which I've really highlighted for you. It really is a complex syndicate of worldwide agencies and local government agencies. And then the motive in the current book is actually to prepare the population to accept it, a needle in every arm every 6 months. That was the motive. Now the next book is going to examine the crime of actually administering it, a needle in every arm. And a needle in every arm is a very important moniker. That meant everybody, no exceptions, down to babies age 6 months. Doesn't matter what the regulatory agencies say. Doesn't matter what the clinical trials show. Doesn't matter if it's safe or not safe. Doesn't matter if it's efficacious. It's clear there is a strong desire to get a needle in every arm every 6 months, and people should be asking the question, why?
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to ask you one more question because I'm sorry, I keep on saying that. But it just in light of the fact that I know that President Trump was issued a challenge to finally speak out against the mandated products. Now we know that he did not mandate them, but he's been acting sure proud of them. And it looks like he responded to that challenge and said, I don't want to hear it. I think they're great. Any thoughts on that?
I tell you, I've talked to personal conversations with Wayne Allen Root. Wayne is friends with former President Trump, and he also confirms Trump will not discuss it, categorically will not discuss it. I think politically it's a blunder. If he was to come out and say, drop the mandates, drop the products, there would be an American celebration. There would be a holiday. This is a menace over the country. He thinks Hunter Biden's laptop is a bigger political issue than these mandated products that people are losing their jobs over, getting kicked over the military. He actually is out of touch with America. There's no doubt about it. The biggest menace is these products. If he came out against it, he would win in a landslide. And even people like Alex Jones is basically saying, listen, I'm dropping support for you unless you can come out and give America a clean slate on this.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how people respond to that declaration. I mean, all I can think of is the verse, pride comes before the fall. And he certainly seems proud of something that I don't understand why he is so proud of it. But I could talk to you all day, Dr. Peter. And I really appreciate you coming on and playing the game with me to keep this video up. Hopefully it stays up. And what can we watch out for you to do next? I know we can follow you on your website. Anything else that you,
Sure.
I mean, I want to get your book.
Yeah, Christy, follow me. My link tree is Peter McCullough, MD. That'll give you links to the book, America Out Loud Talk Radio, McCullough Report, and then all my social media feeds. I think that's where the support is. I think everybody needs the book. It's just been brought on as required college reading at Northeastern University. Wow. Yeah, because it's nonfiction. It's a narrative. It's a story. It's not a medical book, and it's the only book on the topic where you can actually get through it in a couple hours, because it's so skillfully written, and it actually brings in important historical context as well. But it's a story that helps one understand a complex reality. What we've discussed, Christy, is a very complex, almost mind-blowing reality. You and I have gone over this. Many aspects of this is mind-blowing, that people's trust is absolutely lost in government agencies and in big pharma. They're seeing their loved ones die. They're seeing massive numbers of deaths of people taking it in the arm. You just cannot imagine this is happening. This is a complex reality. It can be best understood in a colorful story that is nonfiction and well cited.
All right. And I showed you the book. So guys, make sure that you get it along with all the other ones that we've talked about on the show. Thank you so much for joining me. And I'm sure we'll be talking again soon. Good luck in everything that you're doing.
Thank you.